have an unidentified flying object.
I'm Jack Oswald, and you're listening.
This is Mr. Hammond, and you're listening to...
I'm Richard C. Hoagland, and you're listening to...
I'm Art Bell, and you're listening to Dr. J Radio Live.
We have an unidentified flying object.
Welcome back to another episode of Dr. J Radio Live. Of course, as always, we have a super fantastic show for you today. And of course, today we have a good friend going back 5 years, and you guys will have some fun. And by all means, you can interact, but since the last 4 times he's been on, I want to say he was somewhat unfairly attacked on the last show, but the other times were good. They were proper with the debate, but nonetheless, the reason why I'm giving you these clues is so everybody out there can check out all the social media if you haven't already to know who it is. And let me just say one thing. Yes, we're going to be talking about the opposite side of pro-UFO today. We're going to be talking about skepticism, healthy skepticism, scientific skepticism. But here's what I don't want everybody out there globally to do. Please don't dismiss what is being said right off the bat because you don't believe it. You need to keep in mind that who we're speaking to is a member of Mensa. What does that mean? That means he is among the 2% most intelligent people in the world. This is a worldwide organization founded in 1947. Mensa meaning is Latin, meaning table or circular, for people of high IQs to, have friendly chats and events. And for that matter, our guest even spoke at Mensa. Also, don't forget, we have our new bookstore, which is located on the site that is www.drjradiolive.com, DRJ Radio Live. Just as you will see our guest's book, that will take you straight to Amazon to get it. Now, let me throw a few things on the table as we introduce them. Where I am broadcasting right from the City of Angels, just as my guest. We are in the Pacific time zone, technically a little past that, 7:02 p.m. PT on the East Coast. Good friend of mine and guest co-host tonight. It is 10 p.m. Eastern time, and London, where my original co-host who's off for the night, Johnny Webb, it's 3 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time, and then of course everywhere else around the world you can figure out with those 3 time zones what it is, or just Google world clock if you can't figure it out. But nonetheless, I know we get questions from as far east as Moscow, Indonesia, I think that even Australia, as far north as of course Canada, Atlanta, and Alaska, west, I guess right before the times or the international date line, would be Hawaii, and every state, not to mention South America, Mexico, Brazil, you name it, just think of it, and it is there for you to hear. So with that being said, now that I've spilled the beans, let me introduce my good friend and skeptic and author of Bad UFOs, who also operates a daily blog, which he'll tell you about in a second. And again, don't forget, a member of Mensa, MENSA. Google that, mensa.org. It is the one and only Robert Sheaffer. Mr. Sheaffer, welcome back, my friend.
Hey, thank you, Dr. J. It's a pleasure to be here. I should point out that there's also a lot of goofy stuff in Mensa too. Just having a high IQ doesn't mean you don't come up with crazy stuff sometimes, and you'll find people, believing in astrology and all kinds of other weird stuff within Mensa. But still, it's a fascinating organization, and there's some good discussions and lectures and things like that going on.
Exactly, and one thing I like about it is the fact that this was formed 69 years ago, which, according to a lot of people, the same year as the Roswell crash, which allegedly happened this week. But before we do that, I'm going to go in chronological order and ask you about certain events, sightings, and I want to hear your side, which I think the world needs to hear. But let me just throw this out on you first. What do you think of what David Wilcock and all the other people have been saying lately about these blue avian extraterrestrials, which shocked me because you're talking about Sesame Street's Big Bird dyed in blue controlling the world?
Yeah, well, the big bird is yellow, so it's a different species of bird here. But well, and I thought really it was a praying mantis who were in charge, because if you've read the book by David Jacobs, a recent book that's called Walking Among Us or something like that, in which he says, that the aliens are here, they're infiltrating us, and so on. And he has this whole taxonomy or zoology or whatever you want to call it of all the different types of aliens. There's the large grays and the small grays and the medium-sized grays and this and that, and the insectoids who look like praying mantises. Now, according to Jacobs and his so-called abductees, or people who believe they've been abducted, they say that the insectoids are in charge, these big praying mantis guys. Now, somehow they must have got it wrong, because David Wilcock is saying that the big birds are in charge. So I really don't know who is in charge here. But I think it just depends on who you talk to.
Exactly, and I'm glad you brought that up, because Linda Moulton Howe last week was talking about World War II being fought as a proxy war from warring factions of extraterrestrials. So, for instance, the U.S. is aligned with reptilians. I'm just giving examples. Then the praying mantis were aligned with Hitler. Then the Greys were aligned with the Soviet Union. I'm just picking species.
Something like that. Well,
that's what the story's going around, yeah.
Wow, I wonder where she got that one from.
What do you think about
I can't imagine, what kind of source she had for that, but...
Well, tell me what you think about this. According to her research, that...
The one thing I wanted to say was that, it's people like Linda Moulton Howe and David Wilcock, it's like they don't really need sources. If somebody tells you a story, that's good enough, They don't... they don't care if there's any real, substance or any real facts behind it. That's, it's kind of disturbing, but...
Yes, definitely. Now, going back even further in time, Linda Moulton Howe talks about the fact that Earth has been terraformed for 270 million years to create Homo sapiens. Now, I don't mean to knock on her either. All my guests are friends, and I treat them with respect in any way whatsoever. But you got to obviously question where this information comes from, such as the warring factions from World War II. All this stuff. Because, first of all, 270 million years ago. What was that? After our third or fourth?
Yeah, I forget what the name of that period was, but it was like at the very beginning of the dinosaur era, when these large dinosaurs that we're familiar with hadn't yet evolved, and I guess it were just the smaller ones and the reptiles and things like that. And to say that there's anything having to do with Homo sapiens that far back is pretty bizarre.
Especially since we didn't even have, Homo sapiens on this planet till, up to 200,000 years ago, and that might not even be.
I guess depends on where you want to draw the line with, was Lucy a human being, Australopithecus or whatever, and, people can argue about that, but modern humans are just, at most a few 100,000 years, and if you want specifically the Cro-Magnons, as I guess we are all the descendants of, that was only, 35,000 years or thereabouts.
Yes. And again, 270 million years ago, there were 6 extinction-level events that at least is accepted by scientists. And there was, I saw a really amazing graph which shows you the timeline of the last 500 million years and of each of the extinction level events. So almost every time, the majority of species were wiped off the face of this earth.
Yeah.
Giving room
And in
for
all
the next
likelihood,
ones.
these were asteroids. In other words, even bigger ones than we hit when the dinosaurs got wiped out. Because when a big old asteroid, first of all, you got to realize that these things are going to hit the Earth at many kilometers per second. And the kinetic energy of that is just phenomenal. And what it does is it just throws up all kinds of dust. And worse than that, apparently, it throws up, heated rock, molten rock. And it's kind of like raining molten rock for like a while or something, like an hour or something across the whole Earth. And basically anything that's out there gets, fricasseed. And the only thing that can make it through there is something that's small enough to hide in a hole somewhere. And even then the question is, when you come out, what's left? What are you going to eat? And how are you going to survive? So, yeah, these things are serious problems.
I would definitely agree.
Yeah.
Especially since 65 or 66 million years ago was the last extinction level event. I don't know if it was the end of the Jurassic period or that was the period before, but the point being is we didn't have anything resembling humanoids, because as you know, what the general scientific what's accepted in science is that at one point in time, these chimpanzees, or what you called them, before Cro-Magnon and all this, what Lucy was, what happened was they were in trees, using all four of their limbs to grab things. But something happened.
Some of them were.
Where something happened where all of a sudden these jungles and just forests were wiped out, so they had to get off and start walking to get to the next location. And that, according to History Channel, the World in 60 Minutes, or the History of Earth in 60 Minutes, and other stuff like that, says is the first instant of a bipedal.
Yeah. But the notion that you're going to go back 270 million years and find any living form that has anything to do with Homo sapiens is pretty bizarre. I don't think you even had any mammals yet at that time. Now, by the end of the dinosaur era, Cretaceous, Tertiary, that's the name of the boundary. Cretaceous was the period right before the asteroid hit, and afterwards was Tertiary. It was the geological era that they call that. And then you had mammals, but they were quite small. They were like little mice and little creatures like that running around, little gerbils, whatever. And they were just hiding in holes, which is how they could survive, when this horrible thing happened. I'm sure that a number of dinosaurs individually probably did survive this, but everything had changed so much. And let's face it, if you're huge like that, you need a huge amount of food. If you're something small, well, you can, hide and, eat whatever you can find, and eventually, something will grow back and you can eat it. But if you're the size of a T-Rex or something, well, you're going to need a lot of food, and you're just not going to find it,
Yes, exactly. And then, of course, you have, trilobites, which were the longest living creature that survived all these different extinction level events until it finally, I think, gave away, was it approximately 250 million years ago? But again, you're talking drastic numbers. That is 1,000 times more than what happened 250,000 years ago. And wasn't Lucy labeled as 2.7 million years old? But again,
something like that.
And they labeled her as a female. Obviously, she was about 4 or 5 species prior to Homo sapien, right?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I don't know that they've precisely drawn out all of the different, groups and so on, but it's, we have a general idea of how that, went down.
Yes.
And this whole notion that, that there's these, what was it that David Wilcock was saying, that there's these spheres that are blocking the solar system or something like that, or I really can't imagine how, anybody could have any evidence for a thing like that. But, for a lot of people, they don't really care if there's evidence or not. If it sounds like a good story, they're going to go for it.
That's right. Which is why, I mean, again, we have a huge core audience, all you out there listening. I just remember, you gotta have fair and balance, just like O'Reilly says. You know, you can't show one side, an extreme side of that, without showing the other side. So what boggled me the most is people have been talking about grays since the 40s, if not, and 50s and on. And then you hear about the space brothers, the Venusians, the ones that came from Mars and Venus that looked like us. But now, you're hit with this bombshell from Corey Good, David Woolcock, and half the other people at Contact in the Desert talking about these tall blue avian creatures that are really in control. And I was like, wow, where did that come from? I mean, I haven't seen a skeleton. I don't even think someone who claims to be an abductee has ever even talked about something like that. So this seems to be 2016 information as opposed to 1999, 1984, and so on and so forth.
Well, it's always good to stay up to date on these things. You know, next year it may be, you know, orange lizards or something like that. This year it's blue avians.
That is totally ironic. I have no idea why and what would cause that. But again, like you said, what's going to happen in a few years from now? You know, are they going to be another being? You know.
I don't know. It really looks like nobody really is following up on this. Nobody is saying, well, you said this stuff 2 years ago and it was wrong, and now why should we believe what you're saying now? You know, a lot of people don't take ufology and claims of aliens and whatever as like serious information or as information that, you know, that needs to be proven to be true. A lot of people, it's just entertainment. They want to believe it because it's interesting, because it's fun to believe that there's all this stuff going on, and sooner or later we're going to have disclosure, and they're going to open up the files and tell us all about the reptoids and the lizard people and all that other stuff. But, I mean, if you really want to be serious about this, and you think, okay, people say, I want to believe. Well, no, I don't want to believe. I want to know. You know, to know, you have to have knowledge. You have to have factual information that can be substantiated in some way. But a lot of people, it's just fun to believe, and so you know, that's nobody's really going to be checking up on anything, unfortunately.
Yes, exactly. Now let's go back into 1947. What do you think about Roswell?
Well, it's very interesting, and the story has changed a whole lot over time, which is something that a lot of people aren't aware of. Originally, of course, it was, you know, Mac Brazel is a guy who supposedly found debris out in the desert, and the supposed crash date, according to these guys at the Roswell, this little symposium they had there, July 2nd is supposed to be the day that the thing crashed, and then a couple days later, Brazel comes into town, and he has some little pieces of what he described as looking like tinfoil and sticks. 5 pounds approximately worth of tinfoil and sticks. I don't see how you get an extraterrestrial spacecraft out of that. But at that time, the idea of UFOs was not yet synonymous with you know, an extraterrestrial spacecraft like it is today. But, you know, a flying saucer might be something like a hubcap. It might be some little device that somebody somewhere had invented, almost like a drone or something. I mean, it was all, you know, that kind of speculation. And you see, but the interesting thing is this, that Mac Brazel was out riding, you know, checking out on the ranch and seeing how the animals are doing and everything, as he would do every day. When he found this stuff, he said that was June 14th. But he didn't think anything of it. Then later, what happened between June 14th and July 2nd was Kenneth Arnold, June 24th. 10 days after Brazel saw something out in the desert, then all of a sudden the news was filled with, you know, stories about flying saucers and Kenneth Arnold, and immediately it was a huge sensation. Now this, of course, being the golden age of radio, pretty much everybody had a radio in those days, and they listened to it a lot the way that people watch TV today. And so I'm sure that Brazel and his family heard the radio stories about flying saucers, and he started to think, well, gee, what is that thing I found out there? Maybe that has something to do with flying saucers. So he goes into town and he tells the sheriff, and the sheriff says, well, you better talk to the people at the Army Air Base. And so he does, and so they send out a couple people to pick it up and bring it back in. But they unwisely issued a press release that said, oh, well, we have found the debris from a flying saucer out, on a ranch near Roswell.
And
really, they didn't know what it was.
For an award, not just anything. He turned it in because there was a $5,000 reward at the time, right?
Yeah, I don't know the specifics who was offering the reward, but I'm sure he thought it could be something very important. And then, of course, they send it on to Dallas to what's the name of the field down there, and they look at it, and the weather guy says, oh, I know what that is. That's a weather balloon. Well, maybe not strictly a weather balloon, but it was a balloon. It was probably a Project Mogul balloon. And so that was why, and then it was a one-day wonder. The story was, in the slide that I used in talking to Mensa about the Roswell slides in my PowerPoint presentation.
No, you're talking about the pictures, the couple pictures of the
July
mummy.
8th and July 9th, because July 8th, the Roswell Daily Record says, Army finds debris from flying saucer out on the ranch. Then July 9th, it says something about this Army deflates the saucer or something like that. So I mean, it was a news story for one day, and then it went away because of course people will say the believers in the conspiracy will say that they're covering it up and they made up that cover story, but it's not. So I mean. It was so quick, and people forgot about it. But now, to get into some of the more recent stuff, if you notice that Schmidt and Carey, who have written several books on Roswell,
as a matter of fact,
they
I just got their new book that they sent me from the publisher, Children of Roswell.
Yes, I have that book, and I started to read it. And what's interesting is now they're claiming that the Army and the government knew all about saucers even before Mac Brazel, that they knew they had this cover-up mechanism, this whole, cover-up, they had agencies and they had, groups, within the Army whose job it was to cover things up. And this was all in place even before, Brazel came into town with his debris. And it's like they were saying, oh, we know something was crashed around here somewhere, but we haven't found it yet. So, I mean, this was, this story just gets more and more implausible the more times they tell it. And of course, they didn't mention anything in that book about these Roswell slides, which was a huge embarrassment to Schmidt and Carey and several others the previous year. This was just last year. This was May of last year that they did they had to hype this thing to death, saying we have photos of a dead alien. We have 2 Kodachrome slides showing a dead alien from Roswell, and then they handed it off to Jaime Maussan in Mexico, who was like the P.T. Barnum of Mexico, and his whole job, his whole career is based on just making up stuff and taking these incredibly bad claims of alien photos and UFO photos, dead aliens, live aliens, you name it, and and putting these on TV shows and making videos of them and things. My favorite was when Jaime Maussan had a picture on the front cover of his magazine. It says a horse in the sky, which is what it appeared to be. I mean, it was photoshopped, but I mean, who's going to buy a magazine with, there's a horse flying across the sky, But apparently, some people go for it.
Agreed.
But, when you get people like this, I mean, how can you trust anything that they're trying to sell you,
And that's the thing that people need to realize. Don't believe everything you hear. You got to have some skepticism is natural. Okay? Now, sure, there's things going on, but if you have a disinformation agent such as Richard Doty, right, who on camera 30 years later says, yes, I messed with Paul Benowitz, I briefed Linda Moulton Howe, I know what I gave her, we took the sign of captain's office or some sort of small office to make it look like it's the major or lieutenant colonel base commander's office. The point is he is just upfront and very blatant on how many people he purposely, that was as part of his job. We didn't want Soviets or any enemies to know that we're testing drones or anything else in 85. So that begs the question. It's like, how do people build off of one thing they were told, which is told by a liar?
But again, I'm not even sure if I believe Doty when he says that. I mean, that's a pretty remarkable claim that he's, doing all these things and messing up so many people. But the actual evidence of this is kind of, is kind of sparse. So, I really, I'm a little confused by that whole Benowitz story because I don't know how much of it to believe. Maybe someday I'll do an investigation or somebody will do an investigation that'll really show the whole thing and what actually went down there. But I suspect that there's disinformation in a number of different directions going on there. And sometimes people just, make up these stories or exaggerate these stories in order to, make their own importance, to make them seem important. That, there are some people who will just, make up, you'll mention a particular subject and they'll make up something which is obviously a contrived story. Oh, I was there, I saw it when it happened or whatever. And, and it's a good story and all that, but, again, where's the proof?
Hey, Robert, this is Tom.
Yeah. Hey, Tom.
How's it going?
Pretty good.
Do you think there's more of a tendency now for people to want to buy into just about anything, almost a hunger to buy into some kind of answer without evidence? They're willing to
Well,
just
it's
jump?
hard to say because that's kind of always been there. Even if you go back all the way to Adamski, and there's a very excellent book that's just an e-book that's just been published in the past year by, Mallet and Hayden, I think, on the, what's the exact name of it? It's the critical analysis of George Adamski, and it's shown that, he was just lying about all kinds of things. You can't prove for certain that he was lying about these photos that he took, although it certainly seems likely. All this business about, he says, he met the Pope and so on. No, he didn't. That was, he told people that he did, but no evidence that he actually did. And, as far even the meeting the Venusians, nobody actually saw the so-called Venusians. He was like the other side of a ridge or something, and he claimed he met them, but then he had footprints that, anybody can make footprints, So, but many people were willing to believe that. So, and that's just as crazy as the stuff that's coming into today. It's really hard to say if it's more credible, but more credulity, but, it's possible it could be because, stuff like we were just saying, the blue avians and the reptoids and all this stuff, I want to see some really good solid proof before I believe anything like that.
I think
people don't look at it that way.
I think we have a lot of 9/10 of possibility. There's this 8 or 9 points to almost to 10, and so then there's a jump to 10 without the evidence. So you have all these dots that seem to lead in a particular direction, and then somebody says, since we have, we've reached 8 and 9, we're going to jump to 10 and make a conclusion. It seems to me.
Well, I don't think we even got to 8 or 9. I think we're at 1 or 2, and then people are jumping from 2 to 10.
Yeah.
As I see
or
it.
1 or half.
Yeah, or 1.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, I'm with you there. Actually, yeah.
Yeah.
And the law is when you're in court without evidence, you can't convict. And yet it seems to be in ufology, you get to 1s and 2s and 3s and 4s, and people jump to 10, and then all of a sudden they've got a case. Now, I got a question for you, though, is what about some of these incidents that do seem to be unexplainable, that there isn't enough refutable, you can't refute it, it's difficult to refute it. How do you feel about that? I mean, some of these personal accounts people have had where they've actually seen things,
which
and then
ones
you
are we talking about? I mean, can we be specific about?
Let's take, for example, what we see lately is a lot of video, people filming lights in the sky. What do you think about that? I mean, that's kind of irrefutable. What do you think?
Well, lights in the sky don't prove anything. In fact, even J. Allen Hynek, because I knew him, I took classes from him at Northwestern. He was the Blue Book, scientific consultant, and he was sort of a believer in UFOs. I mean, not a hardcore believer, didn't believe every story, but he believes that there was definitely something going on. But even he said he basically dismissed this whole idea about lights in the sky. He said, like, we're never going to prove anything like this. We've got to have either, tangible evidence, physical evidence, or, really good photographs or videos or something like that. And also now this guy, if you're familiar with a guy a British guy goes by the name of Isaac Coy, K-O-I, and he has, just look on Facebook and look on the internet, he has a site where he goes into these videos. And he's not a skeptic, by the way, in the same sense that I am. He's a skeptical researcher, or a skeptical believer, if you will, but he has something over 100 different videos of people that posted stuff, on YouTube and on Facebook and wherever else that are supposed to show, lights in the sky that are supposed to be unidentified. Many of these are hoaxes because nowadays it's very easy to do this for people who, have software and know how to use it and create, things like that. And so, just if all you've got is a light in the sky that you don't know what it is, you really don't have anything, because there's about 1,000 things that it could possibly
be.
It's only one. It's clear and unambiguous. That's, you have to...
True, granted, very much granted. I grant you that. But there are a few cases, obviously, that are just really difficult to refute. And I can't off the top of my head, and it's not a good place to be, is to kind of have a game show fail here about what exactly I'm referring to. But there are a few cases that are difficult to say that didn't happen. I mean, how do you feel about some of those? I mean, I'm sure it's down to just a few that I'm sure you can probably look at and say, wait a minute, I just don't know.
Well, there are some cases that I don't feel we have everything wrapped up real tight, but we have certain, concerns, based on, stuff that's happened during or afterwards that just doesn't really, doesn't look right. And in fact, some things are like impossible. For example, the famous Cash-Landrum. You go back to 1980 in Texas, and these women supposedly saw this UFO hovering where they were driving out in the woods, or actually in the suburban area. It wasn't really like very far away from outside of Houston. It was just a few miles, I think, outside the city. And then they claimed that 30 helicopters or 20, I don't remember the exact number, of the large Hueys with the double rotors and so on came and chased the object and so on. Well, strictly speaking, you can't explain that because and a lot of work and a lot of time has gone into this, and of looking into it. And people like I think John Alexander and many others have looked into it. Basically, the helicopters don't exist. They just don't exist. There's no place that many helicopters, exist anywhere in that region of the U.S. Or possibly anywhere in the U.S. So what's the conclusion? It's either, the real conclusion is, okay, they made up that part of the story. Okay, but if they made up that part of the story, what else did they make up? So again, and then supposedly, what's her name, Betty Cash, I guess, was the one who supposedly had these burns on her, and it supposedly was
Betty Cash
radio.
And Landrum, Vicky Landrum, yes.
Yeah. Where she supposedly had these burns that were, from the beam on the UFO, but it had like shadows on it, like if you had. Like, say you're wearing glasses and you get a sunburn, you have a shadow of the glasses on your face because that area didn't get sunburned. And that sort of thing was on her burns. Now, that's not possible if something far away is sending beams at you. And so the only reasonable conclusion is that she faked that with like a sun lamp or something and put something on there and covered up certain areas and then left the other areas uncovered. And so she got a little bit of, gave herself a little bit of a sunburn. I'm terrible. I'm a skeptic, but, I have to look for something that makes sense. And, why do people act strange like this? I don't really know. They've never, even though that these, they still refuse to release the medical records in this case. And, on the one hand, they say, well, look, the medical records prove that this was a real event. Okay, let's see the medical records. No, you can't see them. They're private. Well, if they're private, how can you say they prove anything? So, but... and I think the only reason is probably because the doctors realized what was going on, and if we could see those medical records, we would know that these things are, that this was not what they claimed it was. But again, so I say all the details are not completely tied down, and we don't know exactly what happened and exactly how it happened, but we see enough stuff there that makes no sense, that tells us there's something wrong with this story.
Yes. I have 4 questions that these are just the ones I selected. 3 are international, and I feel obligated to at least ask them from these people rather than bringing them in on Skype and so on and so forth. I think 2 look familiar, but I'm just going to go ahead and start from the top. Vienna, Johann, another variation of John or Juan.
Right. Johannes.
Yes. Yeah. What do you believe in, if anything, regarding UFOs, paranormal, etc.?
Well, UFOs, paranormal, etc. Well, it takes in a lot of territory.
Yes, it does. Everything, really.
Yeah, yes. Well, I don't think that there's any alien visitors here or anything like that. People always ask, well, are you saying we're the only intelligent civilization in the universe? No, I never said that. I just said, because the universe is unimaginably vast. And when you just start tallying up the sheer number of planets that probably exist, the notion that, there could be, other planets similar to Earth with life forms similar to Earth is, given the number of planets, it's almost a certainty that you've got all kinds of strange stuff like that. But that doesn't mean that they're here. They could be out there in the Andromeda galaxy, or even further than that, because that's a nearby galaxy. And when we were mentioning about Lucy earlier, I should point out that the amount of time that it takes for light to travel from the Andromeda galaxy to here is about the amount of time that Lucy, time ago that Lucy and her species lived, about a little over between 2.5 million years. So in other words, if it were possible, if there were a civilization in the galaxy, Andromeda galaxy, the nearest galaxy, and if somehow they had a telescope that could look at things on Earth, they would see Earth as it was at the time when Lucy was living.
2.5 million years ago. So 2.5 million
exactly.
light years.
Exactly. And that's the closest galaxy. Now, somebody explain to me how they're going to get here. Well, they won't. So, that aspect of it is, I think is pretty much fantasy land. Now, as far as other paranormal things, if we're talking ghosts and whatever else, well, again, as a skeptic, there's no solid evidence of any of that stuff. People have been doing experiments in psi, I suppose, parapsychology since the late 19th century. Now, how many years ago was that? 130 years or something like that, or more. And nothing has ever come of it that's solid and tangible and repeatable. But they keep hoping that just around the corner that, the next experiments are going to be successful and are going to prove it. So, and I've been active, I've been a member of, what used to be called CSICOP, CSICOP, since the late 70s. And Now it's called CSI. Apparently, when they changed the name, Paul Kurtz, who used to head up the organization, didn't realize that CSI means something else. And so, but anyway, but it's an organization that's skeptics and of people who have done skeptical research and published papers and so on, and critiques of all this paranormal stuff. So I hope this answers his question. Is basically, I don't think any of that has been proven in the way that science requires something to be proven.
Yes, agreed. Now, here's a few more, and again, let's go with the people that are furthest. Okay, Francois, thank you, from Bordeaux, France. Have you ever seen a UFO or Bigfoot? Now, obviously, as you know, UFO is a very large word. It can mean a lot of things that don't necessarily mean ET. Yeah.
Well, yeah, some people say, well, I don't believe in UFOs because I've seen too many of them. Meaning that I've seen too many things that other people might call UFOs. I've seen, when I was younger, I thought, I saw some flying saucers. But then later, I realized that by seeing pretty much the same thing in a different circumstance and seeing it a little better, I realized that, it was a flock of birds that they're gliding and darting about. And when it passes right over quickly, you think, oh my gosh, those are saucers, those are discs. Well, no, they're not. You're seeing the underside of birds moving very fast and reflecting the lights that are nearby, And so there's lots of things that a person might see. I've seen I thought it was a mock image of Jupiter, where how you can have ice crystals that, like a mock sun, and you get on either side of the sun, you can see, sometimes, there's additional suns, what looks like, additional suns, but they're really just, reflections from the ice crystals. And I saw something like that once with Jupiter, and I thought, that's probably what it is, although now I realize there's something they call light pillars, which basically has to do with lights on the ground shining up. And it could have been that, but I really think it was ice crystals. So in that sense, for me, it's unidentified, but it's not really, anything that would be alien. It's just a question. It probably had to do with ice crystals one way or another. It's just a question of, which light were the ice crystals reflecting or refracting. So, yeah, you've got a lot of funny stuff like that. But as far as, anything that people would call a UFO, where you could see it and it's structured and it's, very seems to be unidentifiable, no, I've never seen anything like that. And I spend a lot of time outdoors at night as an amateur astronomer. In fact, you'll find almost the biggest skeptics around are the amateur astronomers, the people who take big telescopes out and are looking at, distant objects in dark skies, for, many hours. These people are pretty much the most skeptical that you'll find. And as far as Bigfoot, no, but I did go on a Bigfoot expedition one time with the late Eric Beckyard. You know who Eric Beckyard was? He died about 6 or 8 years ago. He was a leading Bigfoot guy, and he was also a paranormal and UFO guy. In fact, he opened a UFO museum in San Francisco, but it didn't last very long. I guess he didn't make any money on it. But in fact, I have this on my blog, which is Bad UFOs. And if you just go to Bad UFOs and look for Bigfoot, I think you'll find that aspect, that story of it. We went up. There was a spot in the Sierras, kind of south of Lake Tahoe a bit. If you know where Jackson, California is, one of the gold rush countries, in that gold mother lode area, and you go up the mountain on the highway out of Jackson, California, and there's a national forest. I forget what it's called, but the information is there in the posting. And there was a particular spot where Beckyard thought that, Bigfoot was seen, and he proposed to go up there, and I hadn't been camping for a while, and it was nice weather, so all right, let's go up there for a couple of days and see what we can see. And it was really dark up there, looking at the stars and everything, but as far as, he he thought that, like Bigfoot was a paranormal creature because he understood, and I think a lot of people understand, that the argument against Bigfoot being a physical beast is sort of like the argument against, UFOs being extraterrestrial craft. That Bigfoot, if it were an animal, you have to have a breeding population, you have to have a food source, you're going to have droppings, you're going to have dead bodies. All these things apply if you're going to go out and study bears, or you're going to go out and study moose or anything like that. You're going to deal with this, and even though the animals are going to hide, you're going to find evidence of where they've been and what they've been doing and so on. And there's just no way that you have a breeding population and, you'd find dead big feet around if they were really, physical animals. And so the idea, Beckyard's idea, was this is something like a toolbot or something like that, which is supposed to, be like some Tibetan creature that, changes shape and whatever, and it's, a paranormal or supernatural thing. And so he would take pictures of the trees and look for shapes in the leaves and in the shadows and so on. And if you saw something that looked like a face or looked like a shadow, well, that would be Bigfoot. Of course, you have to have a pretty good imagination to see this. And he claimed that sometimes he would hear, owls of, in the woods and whatever. And, well, we didn't hear anything. But it's, if you go there looking, expecting to find Bigfoot, you'll probably see something in the shadows or something that'll convince yourself if you believe strongly enough. But, again, nothing that you could convince a skeptic that there was any reality to this Bigfoot being up there in this. In fact, I even have the exact location. I have a GPS coordinates of the spot where he said Bigfoot was like the most likely to appear. Yeah. And so if anybody wants to go up there and check it out, they're welcome to do so. But so far, we went up there, we didn't see anything. But
what do you? I got another question added, and these are ones I've selected to add. I just wanted to remind everybody we have a little over 10 minutes left, so if you want to ask something, write it via Twitter, Facebook, or any other chat rooms out there. So let's go. Let me ask these first. Let's see here. Okay, before I go to the domestic question, let's go to... Did I ask Jorge from Monterrey, Mexico yet? No, I didn't. Okay. Like X-Files. X-Files is Mulder. I want, right, and want is capitalized, to believe, but I can't find any shred of evidence other than people's stories. Are you in the same position, and what's your standard? Sorry, it was misspelled.
Yeah. Well, in a sense, but there's a question of burden of proof. In other words, if somebody says, let's say there's two people having a discussion about, aliens coming to Earth, and one guy says yes, and Mulder says, oh yes, aliens are here, and Scully says, no, they're not. The burden of proof is clearly on the person making the assertion, making the claim that something exists when there's no obvious evidence that it does. So the burden of proof is not on Scully to prove that they don't exist. The burden of proof is on Mulder to prove that they are.
And don't forget the famous saying, extraordinary claims require extraordinary measures and proof.
Right.
So it's not like saying this tree is 30 feet old, 30 years old instead of 25. That's a little more simpler to figure out with the rings. But something like this is totally different. Now, this is sort of related. Okay, so we already asked Francois. Okay, now let's go to two domestic ones. This is Michael M., Kalamazoo, Michigan. Most people believe in ET visitations. Why don't you, and what will it take for you to be, I don't know, not to convinced, I think, again, spelled, to convince not only we are not alone, but ETs have created us, but have been with us throughout the last thousands of years?
Well, again, it's a question of what kind of proof do you have? Extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof, and extraordinary proof is not a blurry photo of Bigfoot that's hiding behind a tree or something like that. Extraordinary proof would be the damn thing comes and lands, and the news crews from Channel 10 and Channel 8 and Channel 61
CNN,
come out there, and
BBC,
and CNN gets out there. They might be a little further away. It might take them a little longer to get there, but they'll get there too. And everybody starts filming, and they shoot live from there. And then that door opens up, and a little head sticks out. And this is all, recorded, and it's consistent, and so on. And it's not obviously just somebody with a little model or pulling out a prank or something, or like a little alien face peeping in the window. Remember that one
here's
from a couple of years ago?
My comment about that. I don't even know if that will suffice these days, because our military is always testing new aircraft. So even though we see what a traditional dome-shaped object, prove to me that it's created by something not of this earth, and then let's just say, like you said, little heads pop out. Well, who's to say they're not genetically modified humans, because we have the capabilities to do so these days?
Yeah, it could be, but that whole scenario, well, that's kind of almost like this Annie Jacobsen thing where she says that, Mengele and Stalin got together and made a flying saucer and flew it over, and it crashed in Roswell. And that's bogus for a whole lot of reasons. First of all, if any saucer that allegedly comes down and hovers and lands and allegedly takes off again, it's not going to happen using, contemporary technology, or in fact any technology that one can conceive of, because you're violating the conservation of momentum. In other words, if there's a force being exerted to keep the flying saucer hovering, then there has to be something going down. You know what I mean? There's acceleration downward because of gravity, and if that thing is hovering there and nothing is holding it up and there's no strings or anything like that, then no. Let's say you had jets or propellers or something like that. A helicopter can hover, but it creates a downward force with air from the rotors. Unless something like that is happening, if it's just silently hovering there, you got all kinds of laws of physics being violated. The military can't do that. Nobody can do that. The Russians can't do that. So that would be pretty extraordinary if, again, you could show that it was not just an effect. But, if you could see this thing from several different vantage points and photograph it, and not just one blurry little photo, but if there's, 10 different news organizations and they all get consistent photos of the thing, well, then, that's pretty convincing, especially from different angles and things like that. And you get hundreds of people pull out their cell phones and snap a picture of the thing. All right, then you're starting to talk that's, it's convincing. But that doesn't happen, and it has never happened, and it probably never will happen. Yeah. Indeed, the more people who see something, the less remarkable it is, because it'll turn out to be a balloon or something, or Chinese lanterns or something like that, or a flare drop. So
yeah, exactly, and a lot of people do confuse things, and that's the thing. Is like you said, how do you go from 2 to jump to 10, or as Tom said earlier, from 8 or 9 to 10? Okay, yeah. This is 2 more, and then a third one. Really, they're just coming in. I'm just trying to select which ones might be proper, especially the people who have written several times. Okay, Lisa J. Kastner, a question for our guest tonight. Please comment on the book MO41, A Craft, and MO41, The Bombshell Before Roswell, paperback, January 30, 2016, by Paul Blake Smith, the author. This came from Facebook.
Well, I would have to say I'm not familiar with that book. So I really can't comment on it. I mean, what is it supposed to be, a crash or a sighting,
that's
or what is
saying.
it?
I have no idea. I've never heard of this book, but I'm interested in seeing it at this point. We might have to call and get ourselves some review copies at this point, or But nonetheless, I figured I'd ask her. Okay, let's see here. This is let's see. It's Anonymous 666. What a great name, huh? Yeah.
Oh, it's old Nick himself, right?
Yeah. What do you think of the hundreds of crashes of ET technology that are is it even possible? ? How is again wrong spelling or wrong grammar, but here I'll just read it as is. How do something come here so advanced with technology just to crash? So I'm assuming instead of come here, it's coming here. Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting question. In fact, when I was preparing my talk on the UFO conspiracy claims, I went over to the website of CSETI and our good friend Stephen Greer, and I believe the number was 273 alleged or possible crashes. At least they're not claiming that each and every one is real, and that's not counting the ones on the moon or on Mars, because apparently there's some blurry things on the moon and on Mars
and bases
in the pictures
on
the space program that are also crash saucers. So, yeah, it's a very interesting question. Why would they crash so much? Some people say that they crash because of high-powered radar hits them. Well, radar, of course, is just microwave oven type energy. I mean, just this very same thing as is in your microwave oven. It just absorbs. Essentially water. If there's anything in there that has water, it will absorb the heat from the microwave. So maybe if UFOs are filled with water and they get a big dose of radar, then that makes the water boil or something. But none of that sounds very plausible. Well, again, the question presupposes that this is actually happening, and there doesn't seem to be any real evidence of this. We've talked about Roswell a little bit. Where's the other famous places? Well, of course, Kecksburg in Pennsylvania. They have some people say that a flying acorn or something crashed there, and the military came in and took it off, and so on and so on. However, what they don't seem to realize is that this is a well-known incident in the astronomy world that whatever the date was, December 9th, 1965, I think, something like that, that this was the Great Lakes fireball of that date, that it wasn't just seen in Kecksburg. It wasn't just people in Kecksburg and nowhere else saw this. It was across that whole region from Michigan, Indiana, Ontario, Ohio, Pennsylvania. Lots and lots of people saw this big fireball. It was a very large meteor, and apparently it was an air burst, as many of them are, because of the angle and the speed and everything. It just hits when something comes in at that speed, which is tens of miles, tens of kilometers per second, and it gets into the thick part of the atmosphere. That's like running into a brick wall at 10 miles a second or something like that, and it just shatters.
Yes,
and that's what happened. But people can't judge distances and things. And in fact, I have. If you go to my debunker.com website, or just put in Google, just put debunker Kecksburg, and my page will come up, and it explains this in detail. It shows photos. People had taken photos of this fireball, and in fact, several astronomers studied all the photos and the path and so on of it, and they could determine even where actually this thing had been when it blew up, and also where it was even before it encountered the Earth. They figured out the orbit that this thing had around the sun, because all these asteroids, because really a meteor is just a very small asteroid, where was this thing before encountering the Earth? So, I mean, we know what this thing was. We know where it was. We know what happened to it. And people from that whole region, lots of people said, "Oh, it was right over my town. It fell right near here." No, it didn't. It broke apart over Ontario, not real far from Windsor, not real far from Detroit, and So anybody who thought it was in Pennsylvania or Ohio or, you know, in Indiana, anything like that, they were simply wrong.
Or even
But
Germany,
it's, you know, it's
because
very common.
wasn't the Glock or the Bell identical?
I don't think so. Well, first of all, this whole story about the Bell, the Nazi Bell, is a much more recent vintage, and I think it's not very well attested. I think it's just one or two people claiming that this thing was there. I mean, you don't have any photographs, or you don't have any engineering drawings or anything like that of this. It's easy to make up stories, but there's no real proof that any of that was true.
Yes. A couple more things, and Mr. Sheaffer, if you could please hang by after the show too. So questions, everybody out there listening, I apologize if we didn't ask them, but don't worry. My good friend Robert will be back. Let me say one more thing. I don't have a city or state, which is what I normally ask for. Anybody out there who wishes to opine or ask a question, and if you're not calling or using Skype but are using any of the chat rooms, even our own chat room on the website or Facebook, please, give your name and city/state, if not country, city and country. But nonetheless, this is from Jacqueline. She says, what do you think about graduate students being behind Socorro, New Mexico? I think she's obviously referring to Lonnie Zamora case.
Yes, the Zamora 1964 incident. Anthony Bragalia, who was somewhat reclusive UFO researcher, has gone into that in considerable detail. Now, he is not a skeptic. And in fact, Bragalia was one of the guys who was promoting those Roswell slides last year and trying to make a big thing out of them, although he seems to have seen the errors of his way as far as those specifically. He came up with, he found that apparently there was, I forget the name of it, but there was like a research program at New Mexico Tech. Yeah, because Socorro, where this incident occurred was just outside the town of Socorro and very close to New Mexico Institute of Technology. So really it's a college town there. And he found that some work was being done with balloons that were shaped much like what Zamora supposedly saw. And the hypothesis is that some students got a balloon or several balloons or whatever and caused them to land and to do this. Also, he found apparently, and again, I can't vouch for this myself 100%, but apparently Zamora was well known to the students there, and he wasn't very well liked because he was sort of a buzz killer, in terms of, if they would get drunk or whatever and have parties, and he would come by and I guess, try to throw cold water on the thing and maybe bust a few of them and whatever. And I'm sure that they were all, technically he was in the right to do that. But you know how students are. And so, that part of it is believable. And but at the other hand, nobody has really proven anything on this. In fact, Bragalia actually had the name. He even sent me the name of somebody who allegedly was involved in this. But again, I'm not going to go anywhere with that until there is some sort of proof or some sort of confession or something. So, it's a very interesting hypothesis, but I just really couldn't say at this time. If you want to propose a particular explanation for a case, well, you really have to have just a little more solid, evidence behind it. So I would say I'm keeping an open mind on that. And other people have suggested that it was a hot air balloon, a propane hot air balloon that had landed there, because remember, he said it made a whooshing sound
That's right.
as the thing went up and disappeared. And, nowadays that's a pretty familiar sight. We all know about it. But in the 60s, that was like an experimental balloon, experimental aircraft. And so it is, I think it's at least possible that two people who were wearing white suits, maybe were, working on some sort of a prototype or something of a propane hot air balloon, landed there, and he got spooked, and this thing turned into a UFO story. But again, I can't say any of that with certainty. So that's another one where I think we don't have all the details wrapped up. But again, I don't see any reason to conclude that this is an extraterrestrial event. It probably involves balloonists or people working with balloons in one form or another, even if we don't know exactly who and how just yet.
If you were a lawyer, you'd be someone I would definitely want on my side of the table because of your thought process and, of course, evidence. That's what we do in courts of law, especially
exactly.
in crimes. In criminal procedure and criminal courts, you have to have whatever your story is, it has to be beyond a reasonable doubt. Not just a vote tipping of the scales, such as a civil case. You need beyond a reasonable doubt, and I think that's a long way from here, especially since our technology is so vast and so amazing. I mean, I think it was Edgar Mitchell who even told me before his passing that the lunar module, the LEM, as it was called, had more computing power than a regular calculator. Now, compare that to a smartphone. You're walking around with a tiny computer in your pocket where you can use video, you can use text, you could use your camera, you could use Skype, you could check your email. Basically, there's not much I can't do with my iPhone. And so if that's what we have here in our pockets, what is the military using? And I know from a good friend who fought in Vietnam, and he was a SEAL. He said, whatever you civilians have, think about the military. The military has technology 5 to 10 years more advanced than you. But
well, I'm not sure if that's true. About what? He's saying what? Because you won't get it? Or
Spec Ops, SEALs, Force Delta Rangers.
Ops, yes.
They have even more access to things that are even more advanced. So if what we're using now...
Again, I'm not sure that I believe that. Again, and it may be that this guy was just, saying this in order to make himself seem more knowledgeable and important. But I don't know if you saw very recently, within the past few weeks, there was a story came out about how the nuclear codes or something, some sort of information that's vital to nuclear missile arsenal in the United States are still stored on 8-inch floppy disks.
Wow.
Now, I don't know if you're familiar with the 8-inch floppy disks. Okay. But about 15 years ago, people stopped using the 3.5-inch disks, which were, 1.44 megabits of data. It was a megabytes of data. But anyway, and then you go back, and then before that you had the 5-inch floppy disks, and these were the ones that originally came out with the IBM PC, which was the early 80s. I think it was 1981 or thereabouts. So the standard of a disk was a 5-inch floppy disk. The 8-inch floppy disks go back to the 1970s. A place where I worked at had some of them, and it still used them occasionally, but got rid of them as quick as they could during the 80s. But the point is the military is still using that ancient stuff. The space shuttle, it used not the latest and greatest thing. It was using, I think, cores, magnetic cores. I mean, in other words, ancient stuff. Even at the time that these things were flying, this was ancient stuff that they were using. And I mean, it's just a similar thing. You find this all over. This, I know that I used to work for Zilog, which was a company that made, CPUs. And their heyday was like late 70s and early 80s, the Z80 and so on. And the cruise missiles used the Z8000 made by Zilog. And again, it's a 16-bit a CPU, microprocessor. That wasn't so bad when it started out in maybe around 1980. But again, for years, and for all I know, they're still using them. But they work. So, the military is not really using the latest and the greatest technology. They are using old stuff in many cases, and to try to get them to upgrade to come to the modern world is like pulling teeth sometimes. So I'm not really convinced that that there's all this wonderful stuff that the military has that we don't know about.
Yes. Now, we're down to the wire. We actually went a little over, but thankfully we are the last show on all the networks, so it doesn't really matter. Let me say, again, please hang on till after the show's over for off-the-air discussion. But here's one thing I just received as a message. It says, Mr. Sheaffer, can you comment on, this is in quotes, secrecy by obscurity?
Secrecy by obscurity. Well, that sounds like a good plan, I guess, and in the sense that many people they would try to do their own personal security by just being so inconspicuous. Don't when you go out, don't wear an expensive watch, don't wear fancy clothes, just go out and look ordinary, and you'll probably do just fine. The problem with obscurity is that it's easy to break, especially nowadays with the internet. If somebody, just one person somewhere, finds if there's this hidden gem that's obscure somewhere, that's like hiding in plain sight, but nobody notices it because it's inconspicuous, sooner or later somebody would notice it. And if they could show that it's something remarkable and extraordinary, then they're going to post it onto Facebook or something, and then millions of people are going to see it, and then it's going to go viral. So I just really don't think that that's something that's going to work in the present day and age.
Agreed. Now, I do apologize for everybody else who's been asking questions that we never got to. Don't worry. Like I said, Robert will be back. First of all, I want to remind everybody, don't forget to go to the website and look for all the books, especially from our guest tonight. Bad UFOs.
Yeah, Bad UFOs is my latest UFO book, and it's up to date on all kinds of latest and greatest developments. It's just a couple of months, January. It just first came out, so there's lots of more information in there.
I also like the cover too, because that is one of the most famous fake object, but nonetheless.
Well, it looks like it. No, actually, that's mine. That's not a Adamski photo. It looks like an Adamski photo, but it's mine. No, I explained on the inside there that that's my cottage cheese container UFO. Mm-hmm. I took a cottage cheese container and 2 aluminum plates and put masking tape around the edges of the aluminum plates, and I put little black dots to be like portholes, and I put ping pong balls on the bottom of the plates because Adamski had, these little round balls on the bottom of his saucer. So, yeah, it's sort of an homage to Adamski, but, it's made from very ordinary and rather silly things.
I'm curious as to, after the show and after people get this book, how many of them, just off the top of just right off the top, are going to say, that's a real UFO. I saw that, and little do they realize that it's something you created. Anyhow, don't forget, everybody, Bad UFOs by Mr. Robert Sheaffer. You can get it via Amazon, and you will see the link on our website, which is Dr. J Radio Live. That is the name of the show, as you know, DRJ Radio Live. And don't forget, that is the same name for every, and I mean every, social media account, from Instagram, Twitter, Flickr, Tumblr, YouTube, Google+, Gmail, Pinterest, Slack, Snapchat, just everything. All you have to remember is that one key phrase, no spaces, DRJ Radio Live. That's the way you have to get a hold of me. And this just brings me to one funny little thing. It came from a movie. It was from Woody Harrelson. And he said, basically what happened was there was a bank robbery. And during the bank robbery in this movie, the bank robbers went to the bank manager, pulled out an envelope, and showed him pictures of him with his children and his house. And he flips out when the police arrive, Woody Harrelson being one of them, and says, how did they get that information? And he says, be careful what you Google, Insta, tweet, face. And that's so true. That is so true. But nonetheless, again, everybody, you will see the link on our, just click on the tab, bookstore on drjradiolive.com. And don't forget to watch for archives of this show, which we're still behind. There's so many to post up, but a lot of them are, a few hundred at least, and there are several hundred more. You're talking about 5 years worth of radio shows, anywhere from 3 to 5 nights a week that are available, not to mention other things. YouTube, again, youtube.com/drjradiolive. Now, I want to thank, of course, my team, people who work literally 2 countries, here in the United States and in the UK. You have Johnny Webb, who even at this time, he wasn't able to join us, but he has been, writing some comments and some things, and even passed along a listener question, which I didn't see, from Lisa Kastner. And of course, Tom and everybody else I want to thank because they work so hard. I also want to thank Mr. Sheaffer. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And like we said, we will definitely do this again. And I would love to read that copy of Bad UFOs. And the most important people that need to be thanked are you, the listener. If it wasn't for you guys and gals out there globally, then I would have no purpose to bring you this information. But that's why I thought it was extremely important for you to hear somebody who is not just one of the smartest people, but is, as opposed to just, I don't want anyone to take this wrong. I don't want to use the word gullible, but please, everybody, be careful what you hear and don't just believe it, because some of these speakers, why would you even think they're authority? Look at someone else who's a more of authoritarian figure. And if they tell you something, that's a little different. But if anybody hops on stage and says something, it's not gospel, everybody. You have to keep an open mind, which is why I brought Mr. Sheaffer on, so you can hear everything, as opposed to a small niche of all of it's true, big bluebirds walking around, crash and retrievals here, shoot them down, little tiny Atacama humanoids in Chile, you name it, and therefore, that's it. But the point is, there's so much more to that. So with that being said, and of course I plugged in Robert's book, Bad UFOs. You do also have a website/blog, and I want to give you a chance for a final statement before we wrap up. So tell us where people can read. I believe you update it daily, or at least a few times a week.
It's not. I don't have time to do that, but I update it whenever there is something interesting going on, and when I have something interesting to write about. The most recent one that's on there is about Adamski, and what's happening. Basically, George Adamski today, and the Adamski Foundation, Glenn Steckling, and his claims about every Adamski photograph is authentic, and so on. And so I go into that a little bit, and but it's I try to keep up to date on all the major cases, and so when something comes up that's worthy of note, then I'll put it out there. And I also have debunker.com, which is a website which is it tends to be more of the older information on previous cases, like on the Kecksburg and Kenneth Arnold and things like that. If you want to get the information on and Roswell, the classic cases like that. So.
Yes. Well, nonetheless, as always, it's been a super fascinating show. Robert, thank you so much for joining us. And, of course,
well, thank you.
Everybody out there, thank you for tuning in. Keep a watch on the website, drjradiolive.com, so you can see who's coming next tomorrow night and Thursday. I'm going to leave it up to you to see the website tomorrow and find out tomorrow's guest. But I will give you one little secret. A week from tomorrow, Norio Hayakawa, who was a caller defending Robert Sheaffer when him and I were both bashed, last time he was on. So it'll be really interesting to talk to him about how he was such a fervent believer to finally saying, I don't believe it, and I really want, last time, unfortunately, either he was cut off or hung up, but I doubt he hung up because he took the time and effort to see the phone number and call in and defend Robert. So I think nonetheless it'll be also a fantastic show, but never as knowledgeable as Mr. Sheaffer. With that being said, everybody stay tuned till tomorrow night and you will hear from me, Johnny Webb, and whichever guests we decide to bring. With that being said, this is Dr. J, and I am signing off.